Eric Westman. I'm a professor of medicine at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. I'm an internal medicine specialist and an obesity medicine specialist. So my current day is helping people improve their health by losing weight, reversing diabetes, or other metabolic problems at Duke University. Funny you say pioneer. I think of Dr. Atkins and the physicians before me as the pioneers. My role was to take these pioneering doctors' information and do research on it. So I suppose I'm a pioneer of the research of low carb diets, and that goes back, gosh, through 1998 was the first time I started to really learn about low carb diets. And, you know, I think I was as worried or concerned about telling people to eat fat as most people were at that time, and still some people are today. So that's number one. I have no concern about people eating fat today. And so, but it was through research of our own and other people, and then just understanding the role of nutrition that we need fat in the diet. It's filling, we need protein. And so really what I've learned as a doctor who didn't know much about nutrition, most doctors get no training, that protein comes first. So the emphasis of any sound nutritional program, or just when you're living life, you should, seek protein in any of its forms, the animal or non-animal sources. And my program focuses on eggs, meat, poultry, fish, and shellfish. So allowing for animal sources, and then minimizing the sugars. So it's kind of flipped back when I was starting this. It was food pyramid where you had grains and all that, but when you looked at it, I mean, these were unreasonable amounts of things. And now I've learned that those teaching food pyramids were never studied for human health. So that you got all these governmental guidelines, and the basics of nutrition starts with protein. And then you can run your body on fat or carbs, it's your choice. And depending on the foods you eat, you'll either run your body, meaning the fuel for your body will be coming from carbohydrates or fats. And it's a choice, so I don't give people a hard time if they want to be a carb burner, and they're healthy, but if they want to be a fat burner, meaning just don't eat carbs, that's okay too. I got into this focusing on low carb at the keto level, meaning Atkins induction or protein power, the ketogenic lifestyles, which is really blossomed over the last few years with all these junk food keto products out there now. Have you seen them? So I don't endorse any of these over-the-counter internet, or you just have to be really careful about these internet keto ideas. But I think the idea that everyone needs to be keto, I don't fully think I think the science isn't there yet. So it's all kind of put together in my latest book called End Your Carb Confusion. And there are 3 different levels of carbs in there. We have people take a test that will sort of sort you out into the category we think you should be in, but really only testing a certain level of carbs is the way to know. So I guess, I don't fear fat in the foods, but then I don't teach that everyone has to be keto. So that's kind of where I am today. So it's matching your metabolism with the diet now, and I guess that's sort of a theme that has been there, but usually you're learning from promoters of one certain approach. And we really try to put in all different approaches in this latest book. And if someone does want to reverse diabetes, fix hundreds of pounds of extra weight, fat on their body, then I do still use a keto diet a lot for that, because it's the maximal fat burning and excellent food, delicious food sort of diet that I'm aware of. But I've learned a lot coming from not knowing much at all. A lot of it had to be self-taught or going to travel to sit in the offices of experts of certain areas and trying to bring it all together. Very few people really look at all of these things holistically. So it's like, when did the gut microbiome become so important? I've never taught anyone about the gut microbiome. I've never had to. I've never used a probiotic. So the other thing about my approach is I don't add things. I take away things, which is kind of hard for people to understand. But it's allowing, in some ways, it's a very holistic approach because I let people's body heal itself by taking away the real inflammatory kinds of foods and drinks. So sugar is the bad guy now. So it's gone from fat being bad to now fat's good, and too much sugar is not a good thing. And I have to say, most experts, when you really talk to them, will agree with that. So any sound nutritional approach minimizes refined sugars and starches, the junk foods that populate the middle of our grocery stores. That's what you want to stay away from. In the medical world, I wish the dean of every medical school would get up the first day and say, what people eat really matters. Or I wish a principal of a school, a high school, would get up and say, we're not going to have junk in our cafeterias anymore because what you eat really matters. And it occurred to me recently going to the gas station where I can't get bad gas. It's all beautiful gas, clean. There's no dirt in it, but I can go inside the store area and there's there's harmful and unhealthy things for people, basically junk food, but you can't get junk gas. So we treat our cars better than we treat people. So another element that I've learned very recently, and someone just commented, I was at a meeting that I uttered the term sugar addiction and processed food addiction for the first time he'd heard it. Well, I've been mulling it over for the last few years, just haven't been to meetings, and I've learned a lot, and I'm convinced that among the spectrum of carb eaters, there is sugar and processed food addiction. And we can apply addiction sorts of methods for treatment then. And it may include total abstinence. You wouldn't tell an alcoholic to just have one drink. So if you're a real sugar addict, one M&M means you eat 50, or one piece of candy means you eat the whole, the 10 bags, which is common to have happen. Then you really need to practice avoidance from that and understand that sugar really is a drug. And not everyone has that sort of issue or problem. So it's hard for some people to understand, kind of like the daily habitual drinker that can drink in moderation alcohol may not understand the dilemma or the real problem of an alcoholic and having to abstain. I'm pretty much use the addiction principles now in people with diabetes or people who've had weight loss surgery, because these are, in general, are high prevalence of sugar and food addiction there. It's just totally out of control. And the medical world enables the diabetes. But if the medical world says, oh, eat carbs, we'll just give you medicine to manage, they're really not fixing the underlying problem, which is the processed food and sugar-full food and drinks. So I guess I've learned a lot. Thanks, great question. There are many factors involved. There I think is a genetic tendency, so that if for example, obesity and diabetes and these metabolic issues and overconsumption of sugar and processed food occurs in your family, that you're going to be at higher risk. I mean, it's even gotten to the point where babies who are born to heavy mothers, overweight or obese mothers, will be more likely to be overweight, thinking that even the beginnings of this occurs in utero and while the baby's growing as a fetus, which is kind of scary when you think about that. But you know, in my practice, a lot of it has to do with habit and unfortunate thoughts that have been taught to people over time. Like, you know, you have to have 3 meals a day. You have to have breakfast. No, you don't. I mean, you know, so there's all this stuff that I get to talk to people about: protein coming first. If you're not hungry, you don't have to eat. A lot of it is unlearning. And then the emotional eating, no question, is people can transfer the soothing and the comfort from what would have been, I don't know, going for a run or a jog or a walk or smoking, or, you know, and now transferring it onto food. And so a lot of people who have no other way to deal with emotional issues will tend to, there's a saying, they eat their emotions, and there's a temporary relief, but you know, the downstream consequences are not good, because it doesn't really fix the problem you're in. And then you might have the extra weight or high blood sugars as a consequence. So you know, it cuts across all types of socioeconomic levels and people, personalities. I mean, I worked at a residential program where people would move to Durham for often a month or 6 months at a time. And these people had plenty of money. I mean, in fact, it was expensive to come to these programs. And that's how I got involved and really got the experience of reversal of medical problems by lifestyle, because I saw it. You know, people moved to town and they followed it. And when you see it really working, then, you know, the challenge is to get it to work in people's actual life when they go home and they're dealing with home stress and things like that. But you know, I think there's a genetic tendency running in families, and then the not understanding that sugar is a problem. A lot of people still are focusing on fat being bad and fat being fattening, and that no, sugar is the issue. Well, it always has been, but now it's more regarded as a main concern. So as long as you're eating real foods, so there's an element of a misdirection, and we call it internet keto, where you're learning from pundits on the internet. And many of them never had to lose weight, for example, but they'll teach you how to lose weight by eating more fat or taking their ketone products or things. No, don't do any of that. The idea fundamentally, we are made of protein. Really, I mean, you look at the body composition, it's mainly protein, and that gets turned over and replenished and revitalized. And then really fat and sugar and carbs are a fuel source. But the initial keto, and I got involved in some work with keto measurement, a book called Keto Clarity. And I don't think most people have an issue with having too much protein if they're taught, well, I would say just about no one has an issue if they're taught real food, not protein shakes and powders and things like that. And if they're not obsessing about a ketone level, I don't have people measure ketones at all, because it can be misleading. And so I focus on the results, meaning hunger suppression or normalization, weight loss or diabetes reversal, clothes getting looser. And by following a simple program that's super low in carbs, the 20 to 30 total carbs per day, you don't really need to measure ketones. And a lot of people find that that's one reason why they couldn't do it, that it was too much work or too complicated, too expensive, because they thought a keto diet meant they had to measure ketones. No, not at all. Or a keto diet had to involve macronutrient calculation in an app. No, we don't have people do that at all. So there are a lot of different versions on the internet, and some make it more complicated, some make it simpler than others. And so for most people, protein is not an issue. But if you're gonna like obsess over a keto level, then, well, or some people are measuring glucoses all day long now and not understanding that there's a daily fluctuation in glucose that you shouldn't worry about. And yet a lot of people will worry about it. And so, so this, self-monitoring and biohacking, it can lead to strange sorts of ways of thinking. I think we can help someone's health by getting rid of all the junk food, don't eat junk food. This is all, human-made processed garbage, basically, that is made to make you want to eat more of it so that companies can make more money. It's not based on human health. And you might say, oh, but it tastes so good. Yeah, darn right. There were focus groups and the brilliant minds of the scientists of the companies trying to make it so it tastes so good for you, and you can't stop eating it. And if a trigger food is something that you can't stop eating it, the whole bag is the serving size, no matter what the size of the bag is. If that's a reaction you have to a food, then beware. That's not normal. I mean, the normal thing would be to eat a, 6-8 ounce ribeye, and it's full and filling, and you're getting great nutrition. So the whole idea of eating just, close to the natural type of food, the way it comes. A friend of mine recently said, I just eat food the way it comes. I have chicken and I have broccoli. Like, wow, that's pretty brilliant. And it is low carb too, if you choose that combination. There's some people who are natural exercisers. They're the ones who are the high school athletes, and then the college and all that. And then there are others who would prefer to read a book, who would just as soon sit there and be a bump on the log. So I'm kind of coming into a world of medicine where it was always exercise. I was a little skeptical, right? I don't know. And I can help people without exercise. That's been amazing, because people will come to me in so much pain they can't exercise or they have no energy. And just by changing the carbs in the diet, we can get the body to start burning fat, and people will lose weight and can lose weight without exercising. So then now we're following a cohort of people who've gotten to their goal weights using a low carb diet without exercise. And I start saying, well, it's time to start moving, start exercising. So I think at the end of the day, a combination of a healthy diet, there are a lot of ways to do it, with some sort of movement, exercise. It doesn't have to be at the gym. I'm personally a fan of yoga, because you can do it anywhere, and there are groups that get together to help you get started, or you can even follow someone on the internet. And I have a range of clients, of patients, that many of them who have no money to be able to purchase these sorts of things. So I like an answer that could be used by a wide range of people. But yeah, I think exercise is important as a long-term solution to health, but it doesn't have to be, running in marathons, that sort of thing. And then, of course, the third component of what's called lifestyle medicine is stress management. Nutrition, exercise, stress management, or coping behaviors, and learning to manage that, or address it, or minimize it, I think are the common elements or themes, regardless of what sort of approach you use to treat those. So given the personalization or individualization of a clinic, I'll ask people, well, what did you play in high school? If they did, high school, that was so long ago. Yeah, but well, I love to play volleyball, or I love, well, my goodness, go back to that, so often it's just reconnecting people to what they had enjoyed before. But I think those are there isn't a particular like food you have to eat. I think that's just so narrow. When you look at people around the world, there are these books that try to find out, how can you live to 100 years old, and the people tend to see what they want to see in those books. And what people do, I used a book where pictures were taken of people all around the world, and there was this group in Okinawa, a family, and they had all of their food at the table, and I brought it up at a cocktail party and said, look, here's a healthy eating pattern of people who lived to 100 years old. And of course, there were really old people in the picture. And basically it was seafood and no junk food. But vegetarians will look at it and say, see, it's vegetarian. Meatitarian, low carb people will look at it, see, it's low carb. And the high functionary in the university at this cocktail party said, look, there's beer, that's why it's healthy. So we often will see what we want to see. But I think scientifically, the insulin lowering, keeping insulin low is kind of a common theme. Not eating too much. If you calorie restrict animals, they tend to live longer. So if you can eat less but comfortably, if you naturally do that, great. If you can't naturally do that, come on and check out a low carb diet, because it kind of does that automatically for you. It takes away cravings, and you eat great foods. The folks in other countries, I remember going to Europe some years ago and going for a jog, and all the Europeans were looking at me like, crazy American, jogging, what's going on, So it's a weird kind of American thing to think that you have to jog all the time and do exercise, and meanwhile the French person is having an espresso and smoking a cigarette and eating cheese and having less problems in general. So that's called the French paradox. I don't think it's a paradox. I think eating cheese is healthy. So having that saturated fat and having fat is good for you. And those are kind of common elements that seems to me are worth mentioning. Well, you can tell I'm an optimist at heart. The change is slow, and a lot of the systems aren't going to change because it makes no money to tell someone not to eat sugar. And that's probably the most important message. But I think we have several groups, the Obesity Medicine Association in the US are doctors that are familiar with weight loss and low carb methods. They're very effective. The Society for Metabolic Health Practitioners is a group that doesn't require you to be a physician. So actually, I'm on the board of directors of that organization because I don't think physicians are the answer. I mean, they're overtrained. That you don't need a doctor to help you with lifestyle, knowing how to do an appendectomy. The doctor is overtrained to do this. I think we can train relief workers, if you will, going into an area where there's a disaster. Well, there's a disaster today all over, what's called obesity and diabetes. And the relief workers really just need to go in and talk about carbs, limiting carbs, and the doctor is important to know how to take people off medicine safely. But I'm very optimistic about the new generation growing up with the internet, with availability of information, and then wanting things that work. In my experience with my children and people that age, they don't put up with things that don't work very long. I mean, they'll either go to Dr. Google and find another thing that doesn't work, or but they'll shop around. And so kind of my way to put it together is find something and do it for 2 weeks, whatever you're trying to fix with a lifestyle program. If it doesn't help in 2 weeks, move on to something else. And a program that's really helpful, like a low carb and particularly a keto program, it will work in 2 days, let alone 2 weeks. And so, but what that will do is it'll help you bail out of programs that really aren't helpful, or I'm just so kind of shocked that you can put out an app or a program that doesn't work really, but people will buy it, they think it's great. And well, and I see people more and more doing plant-based diets because, we know it's healthier, and no, it's not. We don't know that, but that's what they say. And they have gained 50 to 100 pounds on a plant-based diet, but they never thought to suspect that the diet was causing it, because that's a healthy thing to do. It couldn't be the diet. And often it's something I have to break very gently, because they're, of a ethical mindset, or falsely think that it's going to save the planet, which, that's a whole nother discussion. But if you are told something is helpful and it's harming you, it's hard to see that. So give anything you're doing for a couple of weeks, then move on to something else. And then there are a lot of ways to be healthy. There are a lot of ways to drive a car. Some are fancier, some are cheaper, but once you're on the floor of the sales floor of the car manufacturer, for example, they're not going to talk about the other car, right? And so I see a lot of people, but they say over that, well, they're selling their program. Of course, they're going to say theirs is the best, and they say theirs is better than everyone else's. Well, the science doesn't say that. So just beware the hawkers of, if something's too expensive and there's always something to pay for, beware. I was going to say, if it seems too good to be true, beware, but no, because low carb keto is really too good to be true. You eat wonderful things and all these things get better. In fact, I have said for years that it's so unbelievable, people don't believe it. And so you often have to get people over a hurdle to just get started. And that's what we've done actually at our Adapt Your Life Academy courses. I'm a company owner of a digital teaching platform and courses, and we put people in a private social media group for 3 weeks as they get started to help them over that hurdle. It's almost like having someone walk to the edge of the pool on a high dive, and the hardest thing is just taking the jump, right? And so we've built into our classes being with other people to help you get started. And I've seen that in my clinic a lot, where but if I'm one-on-one with someone, I can answer their questions and really just say, hey, just try it for a day. It really works that fast. But not that everyone has to do keto and all, but it may be that it's healthier than just about every other diet, I'm not going to go there yet, because I'm not convinced that everyone will live longer doing a keto diet, although there's some people who say that, and there's some animal research that thinks, or that points in that direction. Certainly it's a healthy lifestyle. And I hope the younger folks will gravitate toward things that work. I don't sense there's a fear of eating fat in the younger generations until they hit the medical world and nutrition world, and that's unfortunate. And then the whole cholesterol thing. There are people in the States now, parents getting in trouble because they're not putting their children on medicine to lower cholesterol, which this is crazy. I mean, so in the US or Western medicine, we focus on medication treatment of everything. And no, you don't treat cholesterol in a child, unless there's a familial thing, which is exceedingly rare. It really, the answer is in food. And this was said by Hippocrates, let food be thy medicine. But I saw Rob Lustig give a talk recently. Rob is a professor in San Francisco, pediatric endocrinologist, and he ended his talk by saying, good food is medicine. Bad food requires medicine, which was a very nice twist on the old saying. At the same time, there is a problem with, children and a new generation. All they do is thumb exercises, and if that is leading toward excessive weight gain and fat gain because they're basically the person's sedentary, then, you know, the pediatricians have it right where you limit screen time, you know, get them out of the house, get them out there. That because I know gaming, it can be very often addictive, where you're now eating junk foods, the processed food, and not doing any exercise. It's almost like there's this thing called the sumo wrestler effect, where you eat carbs and protein and fat, and then you fall asleep, so that every little morsel of energy gets turned to fat. So that's kind of the worst combination if you're, you know, watching TV or gaming and you're just constantly eating. Switch to eating things that don't have carbs. So another kind of pearl is that if you don't exercise, if you're not active, you have no business eating carbs. I mean, in terms of fat absorption and fat accumulation. If you exercise and you have the right metabolism, that gives you permission to eat carbs. And just to say another way I've seen this play out is that if someone has always solved their problem with exercise, they were active in high school, university, but they hurt their knee or something. Now they can't exercise. If they didn't learn how to accomplish change by diet, suddenly they're stuck. They think exercise is the only answer, but it's not. I mean, diet is actually very important, but all you have to do is cut back on the carbs if you can't exercise until you can, and then go back to what was working with you before. Again, it's almost like you have no permission eating carbs if you're sedentary. I mean, this is not really, the body's not going to do well with that. But if you are more active and you're dealt that metabolism as a child, then of course you could eat more carbs. And by carbs, I mean sugars and starches that get digested to sugar, glucose mainly. Fructose, though, is an issue as well. And just to say, you don't need to eat fruit. You don't need fruit juice. I promise you'll be fine. And that's probably the number one. No fruit. I can't believe people, and they'll even say my fruit, you know, like it was theirs, you know, my fruit, because the connection is so strong. But fruit is nature's candy. You know, it has sugar, and you have to moderate it, or if you can't moderate it, just let it go for a while. But I'm optimistic. Can't you see?